Welcome once again to Ottawa Today. It's time for our weekly chat with Carleton University political science professor Elliot Tepper. We're going to cover the American presidential campaign, the vice presidential debates last night, and more. Good morning, Elliot.
Good morning, Mark.
How are you this week?
A little bleary-eyed. You got a ball game to keep up with on 1310, as well as those very interesting debates.
Yeah, and I did find it difficult to choose last night because I felt like I sort of had to watch the debate, but at the same time I knew, number one, that I probably wasn't going to learn a whole lot from the debate that I didn't know already about the campaign and about those two individuals. On the other hand, I work for the company that owns the Blue Jays, and I was going to be talking about the Blue Jays today, and baseball's a lot more, playoff baseball's a lot more exciting.
That's what PVRs are for, but it was a long debate. I guess we should directly talk about what's the effect of the debate.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot this morning about who won the debate and who performed better. But here's the big question: to what extent does it matter? Right?
Yeah, I think I did watch the debate and took lots of notes because I'm a junkie. But meanwhile, keeping up with the game. So, a few takeaways from the debate. The first is, and we'll come to your question as kind of the last one. The first is both candidates did what they were supposed to do. And I'm just summarizing what everybody says. They both did what they were supposed to do. Pence did well for himself. He looked presidential. I think he had an easier job in one way. He had a harder case to defend, maybe, but he could be himself. And poor Tim Kaine had to be an attack dog. Well, his job arguably was to make the top of the ticket more likable because he's likable. But he couldn't be likable. He had to be a pit bull. So he performed his job. Pence did his job. I think, and there was, Pence won because he was unflappable and because the pit bull attacks were annoying to a lot of people. So, but I think there's some things that are worth emphasizing that are not getting the attention they deserve. The most important one is, why was Pence put on the ticket in the first place? Trump had he had eager contenders for the job right next to him. Chris Christie was saying, I'm the one who can be an attack dog. You want an attack dog? Pick me. Mike Pence is there because he is a traditional Republican. And not only that, but from the very conservative end of the Republican Party, which is saying a lot since that party has now been pulled pretty far off the center to the right. What Mike Pence did last night was to be a good Republican. That's what he was there for. And I don't think this got the emphasis, he reassures the Republican base. Remember our guidelines. We have guidelines for watching elections. You got to mobilize your own base and depress the others. And another one is, we'll come to on Columbia, elections are won by people who show up to vote. Mike Pence was a good traditional Republican, reassuring maybe to the general population who haven't paid much attention to him, but certainly to those Republicans who are looking for a reason to come home to roost.
The thing I find interesting about that is that the vice president has no power once the president's elected. So a lot of importance is placed on that second spot on the ticket, as though if Donald Trump has a running mate, or if any candidate has a running mate whose views match mine, then I'll vote for that presidential candidate. But once the election's over, if Donald Trump's in the White House, he may rarely ever talk to Mike Pence. It's a ceremonial role from that point forward, unless something happens to the president.
That's one of my points. The very first choice of the new nominee of each party is who's going to be the vice president, and so judgment comes into play. A traditional Republican was picked by Trump, and I think that Mike Pence, in a sense, got off light in that debate because his views are far to the right of even mainstream Republicans. And certainly those Republicans in the suburbs that everybody's talking about Hillary's going after, Republican women in the suburbs are trending toward her. But Mike Pence, in his role as vice presidential choice, there's a couple aspects. One is it's a yin and yang. You've got a top of the ticket who's all flamboyant and off the cuff, and here we have this steady. So as a package, they can present themselves.
Yeah.
But
they're not going to be a package when they're in government, right? It's not a co-presidency. That's the thing I find interesting about it.
The role of the vice president is constitutional, chairs the Senate and so forth, but it really varies considerably from presidency to presidency. Richard Nixon was totally ignored by his boss, but I think the last few years we've seen Joe Biden play a very important role in the Obama administration. The overall thing about each of these is they are one heartbeat away from the president. So was Tim Kaine a good choice, a safe choice to become president as needed? And the same thing for Mike Pence. And so that's what the country, I think, should have been looking for. I'm not sure in all the welter of things we talk about all the time, who's the attack dog, who's calm, whose tie is straighter, there's style over substance. You've got to remember this. You were watching two people, one of whom could easily become a president, if not in the near-term future. It sets them up to be the presidential candidate of their party.
Yeah. I guess what I find interesting, though, is just that, when I was in school, there was sort of a head girl and head boy. I know they don't do it that way anymore, but I'm old enough that was the case when I was a kid. Head girl and head boy, and they would be effectively co-students council presidents, right? What we have with a president and a vice president is a plan A and a plan B. It's not a co-presidency. They're not a team once they're in office. It's the president. And then, maybe the vice president is one of many advisors or who's around the president, but it's not a co-presidency. During the campaign, though, it's almost billed as though, hey, it's these two people versus these two people, when it's really not.
You've got to get to that office, and the VP choices in each case, in part because they might carry their home states, and those are electoral votes. All that's part of it. But there is also a comfort zone. I can now vote for Donald Trump because I'm comfortable with Pence. I can now vote more happily for Hillary Clinton. There's this really interesting guy who's clearly very well qualified. So those who are wondering, should I vote this way or that way or even vote at all, that's what that debate was all about.
Yeah. I think too much emphasis is placed on the vice presidents. So anyway, that's but it's still it's one of the milestones of the campaign, the vice presidential debate, and that's why there's only one of them, and there's three of the other kind.
And the audience is much lower.
Yeah,
the big ticket item is coming up Sunday night, and what a lot of the commentary is saying. Well, and here's I think the big takeaway from that debate: did it reset the campaign for either of the presidential nominees? Did it affect the trajectory of the election itself in terms of the campaign? I think it's safe to say that the trajectory was damaged by Donald Trump's performance. There was a Trump surge. I mean, all the lines were up. He was virtually tied in the national polls. He was in contention in most of the states. And here we have possibly a reset by this calm demeanor, traditional, satisfying Republicans to the Republican base.
Yeah.
Will it change the trajectory? Does Tim Kaine affect that? Probably he didn't. Pence might have.
At 538.com,
yes.
As of today, 75% chance Hillary Clinton will win the presidency, 25% Donald Trump.
All right, and let's talk about that, and thank you. We played this out.
Let me just mention one more thing. The last time the numbers
that was my question.
Yeah, were this high, August 30th.
All right.
The last time that Clinton was this high. And since she hit a peak in mid-August, after the conventions,
7 or 8 points.
Yeah, she got to 89%. And since then, it's been from then until, let's say, September 26th, the day of the first debate.
Right.
It was a pretty steady decline for her and a steady rise for Trump. They
Indeed.
were at 55-45.
Now look.
And now it's 75-25.
So the question we asked on air is, what was the impact of the debate? And we hope that 1 week later you and I could talk about that. Yeah. And we just did. There was a debate bounce for her, and most importantly, the momentum seems to have shifted. And momentum means a lot, on a sports field and certainly in a campaign. Last night's debate was, on the Trump side, a hope that maybe they could recapture the momentum by having a strong performance so that trajectory can be taken away. Reading the commentary by Nate Silver on this, he said some interesting things. He's saying, yes, there's now a comfortable enough lead by Hillary Clinton, but it is not nearly the lead that she had earlier, and it's within that margin that is reversible. So talking now not about the debate, but about the overall election race, who's going to win and who's going to lose, we've got that betting, that kind of estimate based on a poll of polls and a very fancy model. They run 20,000 scenarios and so forth. The momentum seems to have been blunted, but I'm going to suggest this election is not over. Nate Silver is suggesting it's not over because that 3 to 5% gain right now is enough to be reversed within what we've been saying all along, Mark, you and I, right from the first primary. Hillary has a good week. Trump has a bad week. Trump, and all through the primaries, Trump had a lot of good weeks. Afterwards, he had a lot of bad weeks. She had some good weeks. Then that got reversed. She had bad weeks, and he went up and up and up. And the Republicans were coming home in more numbers, so that he was in contention. So I don't think this election is over.
I don't either. Yeah, but a couple points about that, though. Momentum is one thing,
yes.
but and catching up, there's we've seen instances where Donald Trump has closed the gap now a couple of times during the course of this race. But
he's never led.
Yeah, there was one day. There was one day, literally July 30th. It was again, we're using the 538 model here, but it was 50.1% chance Trump would win, 49.9 Clinton on July 30th. That's the only day. And so if you and I are racing in our cars against each other and you're way ahead and I start catching up, and maybe if I even briefly pass you, but I don't have enough gas to make it to the finish line.
Does he have the gas?
Yeah. And then, it doesn't really matter that I caught up to you and that I've got all kinds of momentum if I'm going to run out of gas before we get to the finish line.
But if you don't have the momentum even to catch, then definitely you're going to lose. So what can change this? 2 more debates. Pence maybe was a role model for his boss. Here's how you do it. Stay calm. Don't take the bait. A lot of bait was tossed out by Tim Kaine that was ignored by Mike Pence last night. That's one thing that can change it. We might have more revelations.
Sure.
We know that Julian Assange has just said, I've got a lot more coming. And so revelations on either side. We found some things about the Trump Foundation. So that whole foundation, the Clinton Foundation Pay for Play, has been partially blunted as a matter of attack in this because now the Republicans have said this. The Democrats can come back. Yeah, we take money and help people. You take money and help yourself. So that's partially neutered, but more revelations can come out in all kinds of ways, including from Julian Assange. We also have health issues. These are 2 candidates who are flat out and campaigning, and I don't, we always marveled at the 74-year-old senator from Vermont who how did he do this with these? But they've got a lot of stamina, and stamina was an issue in there. But health, one more hiccup this way or that can change it again. Because if you watched that debate last night, yes, this is all about strength versus weakness. That was the Republican side of the debate, and experience and all that was downplayed. There's also the possibility we've talked about, deliberate manipulation, interference in the election to make something be a game changer. We've had cyber espionage. We know that goes on. But cyber attacks are another matter.
Right.
And the cyber espionage on the Democratic National Committee went on for at least a year, and that was part of a broad pattern of espionage committed apparently by the Russians, almost certainly by the Russians. But the U.S. does, hey, everybody does it. But a cyber attack is another matter. If there's a deliberate manipulation in this, for example, and we've talked about this, if in those emails there's a bogus email that Assange leaks, if the KGB, the old name, plant, but it's egregious. So there might be an attempt to manipulate this election. It's not impossible. And so finally, I don't even like to say this out loud. There's no wood here other than my head, maybe. Assassination is always a possibility. Donald Trump has wound up his supporters on gun control, and twice has said, and then I think probably the Secret Service, I suspect, had a word with him about you don't invite violence against your opponent. But this could go in either direction. So unexpected things might happen. The race isn't over.
Certainly not. 5 weeks to go. 5 weeks from yesterday.
Yeah, watch for an October surprise. And we're in October.
Yeah. 5 weeks from today, you and I will be sitting here and we'll be talking about last night's election.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.